Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. It is me, Kay, and I'm here today to review Beyond the Gates Season 2 episodes 122 and 123. So I'm a little behind, guys. So I watched episodes 122 and 123 today. And so I took a couple of notes. There's just a few things I want to talk about per episode. And hopefully, I don't be before you too long. Okay, starts out episode 122. I have Smitty meets with his boss. Okay, as we know, Smitty had been covering the case with the plasma ring and everything. And so Smitty's boss or his lead or his editor, whoever she was meeting with him to just let him know that she is proud of the work that he has done, and that it was a multi-piece assignment and that she was, even considering recommending him for an award, and so she was talking to him about, possibly if him being a politician's spouse would, conflict with his job. Because as we know, there were rumors, or we know, that Martin was considering running for a Senate seat. And so basically Smitty is, trying to keep the two things separate, him still being able to feel his passions and him still being able to support Martin without the two lines crossing because they think they can get a story out of him or whatever. But nonetheless, we saw him, talking, receiving his possible, accolades that he might get in the future or whatever. And so there was that. Of course, June was standing there eavesdropping, trying to overhear everything that his boss was telling him. And so she ended up bringing him a piece of celebratory pie. And then, Smitty and June, start talking, and he feeling June about the things that Tyrell has done, because we are post Tyrell's graduation already in the Bahamas vacation, the Bahamas family vacation. So, there's that. We see now, last time I watched the episode, it was, Danny mentioned that she was going to go visit somebody. Everybody was hoping that she wasn't speaking about Bill, but she was actually talking about Ashley. And I thought it was interesting that she went to go visit Ashley because, as we know, with all the news that she received from Naomi, she tried to comfort and give Naomi words of wisdom and just be there for Naomi as best as she can. But with her being months, finding out months later, she was wondering if, Naomi, I think Naomi mentioned Ashley knowing Ashley. And so she went to go visit Ashley and basically talked to Ashley. And, she did thank Ashley for being there for Naomi and, being there to listen for her. But she just still couldn't, just imagine, the things that Naomi went through. And today, the other day I mentioned that I was struggling with trying to be empathetic, with Naomi. And today I feel like I found it. Naomi had a lot going on, internally with, her results. And then, it was a lot going on with her grandma. And it was a lot going on with Jacob. And she just didn't want to, add to anybody else's plate. Now, I know that was said the other day. But, I guess today it hit different. And I'm trying not to tug at Naomi wig too much because I'm trying to be understanding. But I do still feel like, things are still skewed between them. And, even watching today's episode, I felt like Naomi still, I just don't understand where there's I still don't understand how there is a way for Jacob to please Naomi, because when he tells her things, I still feel like whether he, tells her what she wants to hear, it's not received well, or if he tells her exactly what he's thinking, it's met with, edge. You know what I mean? So I don't know. But nonetheless, we'll get there when we get there. Leslie is having a coffee. I forgot the name of that place they go, but it's the place where they go for smoothies and stuff and coffee. But Leslie was there. And of course, Darlene was there. And so Leslie and Darlene was just trying to have a mom meeting of the minds. As we know, a couple weeks ago, Leslie said that she has turned over a new leaf because of everything that has went down with Eva. And, Isaiah had a talk with his mom previously about, Eva is going to be around, period. You either like it or you don't. If you don't like it, I don't got to be around. You don't got to worry about me. And so, Darlene has chosen to do her best to accept Eva and be there for her. And I think, with everything that has gone on with Eva, she has done her best to be there in support of Eva, as a way to support Isaiah. And so, Leslie was trying to get some kind of recipes or something, because she did say that, she appreciated Darlene, making her a home cooked meal, making Eva a home cooked meal. And it was very nice. And I just thought, okay, we cool, Leslie was trying to, get her to be more open with her. She was just like, our children love each other, we're probably going to be around each other more, So I just wanted to, just let everything be at ease. And, Darlene still voiced her concerns. She still said, I don't like you. I don't trust you. I don't want to be around you. But she was understanding of Leslie, trying to, find this common ground. And like I said, we love reconciliation. We love a meeting of the minds. We love restoration, Never going to be mad when there's a meeting of the minds. Just hopefully, like Darlene said, Leslie can keep up this streak and they don't have to worry about each other. You know what I'm saying? We don't got to worry about Leslie doing nothing too crazy, because, Leslie seems to be getting her redemption arc right now. So, hopefully, Leslie keeps her word. I'm still a little skeptical myself, but we will see. Samantha and Tyrell meet with June. Okay. So, as you know, Smitty was at Orphan Jeans. Samantha and Tyrell dropped by. Of course, Smitty did fill June in about the tattoo or whatever. And, June kind of called him on his bluff or whatever. As we know, he got that J, which we know J is for Jessica and not for June. But that's the story he told his people. But Tyrell did end up bringing June a gift, We found out that June was allowed to come to Tyrell's graduation. And, of course, over the seasons, we've seen the relationship between Tyrell, Samantha, and June grow to this point. And June was happy that she was able to, be there for Tyrell. And even though she missed a lot of their lives, I think she's starting to feel like her sacrifice was worth it, because she knew that, even though she couldn't give her kids a particular life, that, by giving them up, they were able to come up with a good family, good structure, and they were able to achieve something in life. And so this is a milestone moment. And Tyrell gifted June a graduation picture of himself. And I thought that was so nice to see. I do wish, though, they made the aunt like a focal point or a focal character in the beginning when they were looking for June, and how she was involved in the kids' lives. And so, I thought that it would have been nice for the aunt to probably show up again, because we haven't seen her in a while. But, that's neither here nor there. We're just going along with the story, This deposition day is here. Bill is meeting with Mike, Naomi, and Madison, because Madison is currently being sued by Mike's client. And as we know, Mike is just doing this and taking his case as a get back to Bill, because Bill fired him. But, Mike came in there with his claws out. Madison was super nervous. Naomi did try to give her comforting words during this, thing. Caroline was there, of course, to, start the recording and everything like that. But Mike was just, like, really doing the most. He was really making me angry, because I'm just like, the questions that he was asking Madison, I know he was trying to, quote unquote, do his job, but the questions that he was asking Madison really was pointing to me, was pointing to blame at Madison's mom and not Madison. You trying to make Madison take the blame for something that her mama did, and that's, to me, illogical. But, they still had to go through with the case nonetheless. I think that Bill and Naomi handled everything well, until things just didn't go right. Bill started having health complications, and I was just like, Haley, Bill started stuttering and shaking, and he couldn't get his words out. And I'm just like, Haley, and you just standing there. You know good greaseball. I just can't wait till you get busted. Jacob does stop by and, meet with Smitty at Orphe Jeans, and basically, they just have like their kind of little meeting since they work together as partners on the case. Jacob is still trying to bust the impaler, but he is not getting any signs, or he doesn't know anything. He hasn't heard anything further about the impaler. So basically, both of them are just keeping their ears to the street. Jacob also does feel in Smitty about, him taking Leslie officially off of, her being a suspect of having something to do with it, because Jacob tells Smitty that, Leslie stopped by the police department saying that she wants to, do some digging on Auntie Monica, because she don't want her clinic wrapped up in no other drama. And you know what? I didn't blame her. And Jacob was like, I don't blame her either. And so he was like, I've been doing some digging, and it don't seem like she was involved. And Smitty was like saying, so, that was just that. I do briefly want to discuss Jacob and Naomi though. It kind of happened in the beginning of the episode, but I put other things, in front of it because I did want to spend a little bit more time talking about Jacob and Naomi. As we know, Naomi broke the news to Jacob about her having the gene or whatever. And Jacob is just such a good man. He was there. He was supporting Naomi. He let her know, he needed time to process. And I feel like he communicated that well, or to the best of his capability, where, he told Naomi, Naomi, you had months to sit with this. I'm just not finding out. I can't give you my real raw feelings right now because I'm still thinking about it. I'm still processing how I feel. But I do want to make sure that I'm there to support you 100% through all of your oncology appointments. And even if you do decide to go through with the double mastectomy, I want to be there to support you. And then Naomi did, do her due diligence and asking Jacob, is he really telling her how he feels? And, because she brought up the pregnancy again when Jacob thought he was going to be a dad. And he was just like, even with that, I just want to make sure, our relationship is good. That was a subject that really, tested our relationship. And I want to make sure that we're communicating with each other. I want you to know that nothing means more to me than you do. I love you, and I want to make this work, and I want to be there to support you. So whatever you need me to do, I just want to make sure that you are well, and I want to make sure that you're here with me as long as possible. And so it's just like, you can do no wrong. I was just like, you can do no wrong. Like, what am I gonna say? I don't have no arguments against that. Also, Jacob does go to Orphe Jeans. He picks up some cornbread, and then he goes to visit Eva and Isaiah. Eva expressed her gratitude toward Jacob, bringing her cornbread, because Eva is, her appetite's coming back, so she's loving all the snacks and all the savory foods or whatever. She did go on a walk with Isaiah. She told Isaiah she needed to leave the house, and so they went on a walk. They came back. Jacob came over with the cornbread. She's eating the cornbread. We love Isaiah. He's easy on the eyes, and he run a strict program, and we can't be mad. He just wanted the best for Eva. He said that he almost lost his girlfriend, and it really did something to him. So he's spending a lot of time with her. He's making sure she's good. He's being Dr. Isaiah nurse. You know what I mean? And so that's that. And Jacob comes over to show his support to Isaiah and Eva, and Isaiah does tell him that their mom made her some food. And so Jacob was like, well, Isaiah, you do know if mama made her some food, the soup, the baked potato soup, the lemon bars, the cornbread or whatever, you know, like that's her olive branch, that's her extending the olive branch that she does want to come around or whatever. So I think that's a good sign. And so, you know, Jacob just, you know, reassures them that, you know, Mama Darlene loves them and that, you know, she wants to be in Isaiah's life. And so Isaiah is like receptive to, you know, the gestures or whatever, or the information that Jacob is telling him. And then most of all, you know, Eva was like, you know, even though we don't need your approval, we still love the fact that you approve of us being together and you approve of them being around. Because, you know, Jacob was on the side of the Duprees, rightfully so, because that was his Uncle Ted and his Aunt Danny and, I mean, his Aunt Nicole. And Eva was, you know, y'all know what happened. But, you know, everybody seems to be coming around. Everybody seems to be getting along. You know, this situation with Eva and Kat was, you know, a transformative experience for a lot of people. And so, you know, bygones are being bygoning. You know what I mean? Lastly, I spoke on this briefly, but Madison does, you know, check Bill out, and she makes arrangements for Bill to prepare to go to the hospital to be tested, to get evaluated. So, you know, and then we're moving on into episode 123. And so I got just a few points that I want to just talk about. Danny and Andre are having differing views about treatments and therapies. Okay, so I was hoping this episode that I would see Andre reach out to Jacob, because, you know, he now knows that Jacob has had a conversation with Naomi, but maybe we will see that sometime this week. But as we know, we found out a couple episodes ago that Andre has been doing research on different ways that, or different, you know, steps or things that Danny could do to, you know, prolong her life, because of course she tested positive with the gene. And so they want to be proactive. And so Andre feels like Danny is, you know, living in the moment, but I think he just wants her to, you know, be open to taking different steps. And so, you know, I get both sides. I understand that Danny is saying that it's her body, and, you know, she doesn't want to harp on it or dwell on it or live in fear. And y'all know, because Andre has gone through losing his parents, and it was hard on him. I think, you know, he's trying to prep himself for, you know, if he has to be a supportive spouse to Danny. And, you know, looking at, you know, what Anita and Vernon, you know, were going through, or how they handled it, and then, you know, seeing Jacob and Naomi, and then now Danny and Andre, you know, I do feel like eventually, once Anita finds out, Anita probably will sit down and talk to both Danny and Naomi to best, you know, guide them. Because, you know, they look up to the grands, you know. So I do think that Vernon and Anita will eventually provide a perspective on how to, you know, Anita with how to handle, you know, treatment or being proactive. And then Vernon with, you know, how to be a supportive spouse or whatever like that. But I really, really admired Andre, to say the least. Like, I really admired how he handled the whole situation with Danny. And even with Danny being called in by Naomi and receiving the news about Bill, she wanted to go down there. But Danny is conflicted because, one, she has Andre, she's no longer Bill's wife, so she don't want, and plus with everything that happened, she don't want to be running up there. You know what I'm saying? But then two, like, Andre quickly clocked Danny. And I was like, clock it, Andre, clock it. Danny was really trying to kind of like use intimacy as a scapegoat. And Andre peeped it. I mean, their relationship may have started out like that, but Danny trying to take her mind off of Bill and trying to avoid what Andre was saying. And then, you know, she caught Andre looking at like a photo shoot that was dedicated to the two women warriors who have gone through the experience, and they were, you know, showing the power of their bodies, you know, like their war wounds and everything like that. And so I thought that, you know, him looking at that was his way of helping him deal with it, or helping him see it through his lens if he would have to deal with it, versus Danny. You know, Danny is trying to, again, you know, live in the moment. And so, like I said, I could understand both sides. But in that moment when Danny was blowing off Andre, it really, really, really reminded me a lot of Naomi and how she just shuns, or how she had shunned Jacob. And, you know, Jacob tried to speak to her about how, you know, he could support her, or being there, or being her husband, and, you know, making him a priority. And it was just like, they really just have this my way or the highway type mind. And not to say that, you know, they shouldn't be in control of their bodies, or they shouldn't have control of their autonomy, but I do think that they should take more, because, you know, Anita kind of did it as well. Like, I feel like they have to be more open to, like, it just not affecting them, and that they have to be, you know, open to the support. You know what I mean? Because then if the spouse don't come through and do or be there for you the way you want them to, it's like you kind of might have pushed them away from trying to do that. You know what I'm saying? So they don't know what they can do. And so, you go back and forth with thinking about it. Like, I go back and forth with my thoughts about it, you know. Anita and Vernon speaks to Nicole about Kat moving out. So, ta-da! Nicole didn't know a thing. We all knew Nicole didn't know a thing. And, you know, Vernon kind of, you know, he said he was ready for Kat to go. But Anita was kind of, you know, getting used to Kat being there. And so Anita kind of clocked Kat, you know, a couple days ago about her moving out, about her own condo, because they just didn't feel like her motives was right. But, you know, Vernon and Anita talked to Nicole about it. And so Nicole was just like, oh, this is new news to me. I'm going to go and have a chat with Kat. And I was just like, about time. Because we've been waiting on you to have a chat with Kat. You know, I just feel like Kat could have been, you know, a little bit more prepared for situations like these. But we haven't seen on screen much of the mother-daughter dynamic between Kat and Nicole, the way we've seen it between Danny, Nicole, and Danny and Chelsea. You know what I mean? Chelsea wants to bring awareness to organ donations, and Kat doesn't want to be the face. So, you know, the Duprees, you know, when they go through things, they want to, you know, always give back to, you know, people who have been affected by the same thing. And that's one thing that, you know, I like about their family. When Chelsea, you know, was missing, you know, she did some awareness about that. You know, Anita did her interview about her awareness about her gene and her cancer. And so because Kat helped save Eva's life, you know, Chelsea thought it would be a dope idea for Kat and Eva to, you know, face, you know, bring this type of awareness, or help them raise fundraiser, or, you know, help people who need organ donations. Because, you know, people of color have a high number of they have higher chances of being disadvantaged to not having an organ match, you know, or not being able to get a donation. And so Chelsea wanted to bring awareness to that, and Kat was hesitant about it. She said she did not want to be involved with anything associated with Eva. And I feel like, you know, I understand Kat, because Kat just did this grand thing, you know, trying to save her sister's life, and she didn't have the best rapport with the sister, to now, you know, possibly involving her again, you know, and she's still getting over having to do that. She's still, you know, recuperating. Eva's still recuperating. And so Kat was just adamant about not doing it. Now, I do feel like, you know, Chelsea is open to Kat. And, you know, when Chelsea doesn't want to do something, Kat kind of, you know, is on her about doing it. And so I feel like Chelsea, you know, listens to Kat, and I feel like she takes from Kat. But I just sometimes I feel like when it comes to Kat, it might be slightly uneven. So, but nonetheless, I did understand Kat's strong feelings about it, and I don't think she shouldn't do it if she don't want to. I've always said that Kat shouldn't do anything if she doesn't want to. But I do think since Chelsea is her business partner and Chelsea, it's a give and take. But I thought it was a good idea nonetheless for Chelsea. But Kat did say she did, find a way to compromise. And she was like, if you want to reach out to Eva about it and you want Eva to do it, Eva can, tell her side of the story, but I just don't want her to include me in it. And, Chelsea was like, well, if I reach out to Eva and talk to her about it, are you going to feel away? And Kat was like, no. She was just like, and Chelsea was like, well, are you going to talk junk about me? And Kat was like, well, if I have anything to say, I'll come and say it to you. I was like, oh. But, they're bestie cousins. So, I feel like all is well between them anyway, Let's see, what else? As we know, Bill is in the hospital. I already said that. I can't wait till he gets busted, because while she was crying to Naomi, she had this like evil, mischievous look. I was like, Naomi called Chelsea to fill her in. Chelsea left. She was with Kat. She left. And so then Nicole came and talked to Kat. And she was talking about, she had her whole conversation with Kat about Tomas. And then Kat tells her everything, how she felt bad about Tomas possibly being embarrassed. And, she bought the condo as a way of compromise for Tomas. And, she wanted them to live together. She just felt like it was a good middle ground. And then Nicole tells her basically, this is a decision that should have been made between the both of you. And then Kat told Nicole that, Tomas made it a big deal about, wanting to pay rent and wanting to contribute. And she was just like, illegally, even though the house would be mine, he felt like, it wasn't ours or whatever. And, I feel like Nicole was very understanding of Tomas's perspective, but she still was able to give Kat a perspective like, it's okay if he wants to contribute, and if he wants to, let him. And, this is your first relationship, you're learning everything in real time. So she was just like, if you ever want to come to me and you need guidance, you can do that. I've lived before, I can give you the POVs that you might not have thought of. I can help you out with those things. And I was like, come on, mother-daughter combo, But nonetheless, I'm just over Kat and Tomas, really. But I was like, finally, we get to see Nicole, have this conversation with Kat. At least, it's a start. Because I'm just like, everything is, surrounded by Kat. Everybody always needs to talk to Kat about something. But, nobody ever checks in on Kat to see how Kat is doing or what's on her mind, At the hospital. Naomi and Chelsea are sitting together at the hospital. And, Haley comes out of the room with Bill. Y'all, why Chelsea clock Haley like that? And Haley was just like, oh my God, you just act just like your mother. And then Chelsea was like, I sure do. And I just want you to know. She was like, why? Are you waiting for my dad to die so you can collect his money? She was like, maybe you should have gotten somebody younger. I was like, dang, Chelsea, get her again. Haley just didn't have nothing to say. Haley walked off because I think Chelsea was like, Naomi, did you call mom, or is mom on the way or something? And then Haley was like, oh, you called her? Why does she need to be here to try to throw over that she was the first Mrs. Hamilton in my face? Dude, I was like, oh. Even though we know that Haley don't care. But you know, Haley got to put up this whole facade. And I'm just like, all right now, y'all. Bill is at the hospital a second time because his numbers is off and his blood work ain't right. And we waiting on the results of the blood work to see what's really going on. And Haley is still here. And we haven't reached any kind of conclusion about what's going on. You know what I mean? And what's wrong with Bill, because she keep poisoning him. What's going on? But you know, nonetheless, that's all the notes I have for this episode, guys. What were your thoughts on episodes 122 and 123? Is there anything that I forgot to mention that stuck out to you? Let me know in the comments down below. And I'll be back tomorrow for episode 124. This is